everybody, and welcome to Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I'm Shelley Pruitt, and my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and Mr. Ryan Roberts. Good evening, gentlemen. Suddenly I'm tongue-tied. I was like, Ryan, why are you so itchy? What's going on?
Oh, nothing. I'm just adjusting my shirt.
We're having all
tight, so
we're having all kinds of issues tonight. I had a mini stroke. I had a mini stroke on pre-broadcast. It's all good. It's all good. I'm doing fantastic, by the way. Thank you for asking, Shelley.
Fantastic. And Ryan's still itchy.
Other than my tight shirt, I'm okay. So
okay. Yes, it is tight. You trying to be sexy? Well, we're going to be talking.
I ain't got to try. What you talking about?
I'm telling you, we are talking. Now, Ryan, this is right up your alley, our guest tonight.
Oh, yeah.
Because he is a cryptid guy. He is an author, a researcher, an investigator. He's a writer, and he has 3 books that are currently out. And I am very excited because we met him at Broadhead Manor at the Spirits in the Spring Paracon, and we thoroughly enjoyed getting to talk to him about. He's known as the Mothman guy. I mean, Ryan made a beeline over there. So I want to introduce you guys to and let you guys meet our guest tonight, and that is Mr. Tobias Wayland. Tobias, hello there. Oh my God, he already quit. No, hi, there he is.
No, I am still here and happy to be here. Hello, and thank you for having me.
Hey, it is our pleasure. We had so much fun talking to you, and I know that Ryan I'm sorry for Ryan. I know he spent way too much time over at your booth. I apologize in advance.
No, that's great. Honestly, considering how weird a lot of the stuff that I do is, anybody showing anything more than just a polite interest is great. Like, I always really appreciate it. So yeah, I mean, anytime you see me, come on over, talk my ear off. I love it.
Yeah, I was over his booth like, so what do you think Mothman's wings are made of? I don't know.
Oh, you did not. I am so sorry, Tobias. But because he asked, what do you think Mothman's wings are made of?
Well, these are the important questions.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
It's, boy, honestly, it's difficult to answer that kind of stuff without just falling into like a huge digression, because when you think about something like Mothman, right, it shouldn't be able to fly. So you start thinking about what its wings are made out of. Well, hell, what's the whole thing made out of? How could something that is so often reported as being 6, 7, even 8 feet tall with only a 12 to 15 foot wingspan even get off the ground? Like, I don't know. Like, these are the important questions, though, because you have to kind of question the biological validity of something like that.
Right.
Now, is that
real?
Wait, what'd you say, Shelley?
Is he real?
He's real to the people who see him. That much I know. I guess I kind of struggle with words like real sometimes, because what does that mean in context? We can flippantly say things like, well, reality is what you trip over in the dark, right? But to the witnesses, the people with whom I've spoken, these experiences are real. Like, something has happened to them that they can't explain. And fundamentally, I think that's the really important thing. Even if it turned out to be something with a prosaic explanation, some sort of heretofore undiscovered hallucination or hallucinatory syndrome or something that these people could be suffering from, that doesn't make the experience any less real to them. Like, they still very much believe that they saw what they saw, and when they were experiencing it, to them it was like seeing anything else in their environment. So it certainly didn't seem fake, right? So again, I as close as I can say to any of this being real, right, is that people are really experiencing things that they can't explain, and that frankly we don't understand.
So I guess the better question would be, do you think it's an actual tangible entity, or do you think it's something that's coming from somewhere else, like maybe bleeding into our reality from maybe another dimension, or somehow manifesting itself in our world?
Sure. So when it comes to most things, I am generally much more comfortable saying what I think something isn't than I think it is, because I have so many questions that have gone unanswered. But for something like Mothman specifically, I would be pretty comfortable in saying that what I think it's not is some kind of undiscovered biological species, like any kind of relatively mundane animal that we've just been sharing space with, but haven't formally discovered yet. I think that's very, very unlikely. And I think that it's unlikely for several reasons. First and foremost, it's big. And in the areas that it is sighted, it would be a stretch for me to believe that something that big could exist in the numbers it would need to have a breeding population without it being seen, encountered, really just meaningfully encountered in a way that it would have been officially discovered by now. But then there's all the other stuff, like where does it live? There's not really a good place for this thing to live and hide in these areas that it's seen in. What does it eat? There's no signs of predation in these areas. Like, we have scientists who track stuff like this. They would know if a bunch of animals were going missing out of these environments, right?
Right.
They're not, as far as we know. So it seems, well, and then of course you add in all the stuff like I just mentioned, with the seeming impossibility of its flight, the glowing red eyes, the other associated paranormal phenomena that people often report in coordination with these sightings. And it doesn't really add up to anything like some kind of otherwise mundane, biological species, which opens the door to a lot of weirder explanations, right? All of which I'm open to, because we don't really have the answers necessary yet for me to make any kind of definitive statement. So if you want to talk about the possibilities of like extra dimensionality, or you want to get into the spiritual aspects of or potential spiritual aspects of Mothman, or an extraterrestrial hypothesis, or anything, I am open to it, because boy, we just not know.
Right. So do you find, because whenever he appeared in Point Pleasant and Keel was investigating Mothman, you had all, like you mentioned, you had all of this other paranormal activity happening around with like poltergeist activity, UFO activity. Do you find in the areas in the Midwest where you have investigated Mothman that is also happening?
Yes, it's very, very common. Most of these sighting areas where people are reporting the Mothman sightings out here are also areas that are known for the kinds of anomalous lights that were commonly reported out in Point Pleasant. They're also often known for other strange humanoid sightings. The individual witnesses themselves will often report other paranormal phenomena either directly before or after their sighting. I spoke to a woman in Madison, Wisconsin here, actually, and her family had encountered this thing. It was her and her mother, and they were out driving on Seminole Highway in Madison. And the main person that I initially spoke with was a little kid when this happened, but I have been able to verify this with her mother since. But anyway, they're in the car. Her mother's driving, and she doesn't remember seeing the thing. She just remembers her mom screaming and freaking out, right? And her mother then later claimed to have seen this black winged humanoid with these glowing red eyes basically fly overhead. And she saw it again later. And interestingly enough, and you don't hear about this very often, honestly, the next and really only other sighting she ever had of this thing was inside. So their apartment building had burned down not too long before the initial sighting. And so they had been generously put up by the dad's employer in a new building while their old building was being rebuilt. And she had gone down to do the laundry one day, and in their storage area in the basement, she saw this thing again. I guess that was reportedly watching her then from the storage area. And while, yeah, I know, right?
No, but yeah, I'm like, fuck that. No.
Yeah.
And while this is happening, the family is also experiencing all of this other paranormal activity. So they've got things like, like waking up in the middle of the night to the sound of all of the dishes and glasses flying out of their cupboards and being smashed on the floor, only to run out and discover that nothing had been disturbed. Or a callback to Point Pleasant, hearing the sounds of a phantom baby crying.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of phenomena was haunting them during their experiences with this Mothman like entity. So yeah, I mean it's the reason why I went from talking about winged humanoid sightings in the Midwest to talking about Mothman sightings, frankly, because at a certain point, there just was no better way to contextualize what people were seeing.
Yeah.
So I have a question. You said something about that these people saw it and then they saw it again. Is that common for people who claim to have seen, the Mothman or the winged humanoid to have recurrent sightings of them? They keep happening to them?
No, I'm glad you asked. Actually, that is something of a rarity in these sightings. It is not common. I've had probably, oh boy, let me think. Other than that witness, I'm struggling to think. I've had maybe one or two other people who have had repeat sightings. And so, yeah, no, it's very, very uncommon, actually. It doesn't seem to be the kind of thing that one happens enough, in specific areas for people to encounter it more than once. It doesn't seem to stick around necessarily. It's not like, people talking about forming a relationship with a Sasquatch or something, you don't hear
right.
People do talk about that.
Oh yeah.
You don't hear about that kind of thing with Mothman sighting.
I mean, it's not like the latest and greatest breaking news where apparently Sasquatch got some lady pregnant in Tennessee or something like that. It's not nothing like that. We're not forming those kind of.
Not as far as I know.
Okay.
Just making sure.
No winged Mothman babies running around out there.
Yeah, right.
I see like the cover of the Weekly World News. I was wined and dined by Sasquatch.
Yes, I was Bigfoot's love slave.
Yeah, right.
Mind your business, Tobias.
it's just Mothman playing out his Star Wars fantasy.
Maybe so. See, there you go.
So these sightings, they occur because I have kind of a two-part question. These sightings, they occur all over the Midwest, or are they in concentrated areas?
Well, it is pretty spread out, and the Midwest is vast.
Right.
It's a pretty big area. But yeah, I mean, we've received sightings from Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and southern Michigan, and that's really what led me initially to start referring to this phenomenon as the Lake Michigan Mothman. Is really Lake Michigan was just kind of a convenient geographic area that I could point to, because everything we were getting was kind of coming from within a 200-mile radius of that. But yeah, really, it's been throughout. I've got reports as far north in the Great Lakes as Ontario, Canada. As far east as Maryland, as far west as California, as far south as Texas. So it's all over the entire country.
Okay, so the second part of my question is you were talking about them experiencing other paranormal phenomenon. Do you think these people are predisposed to experiencing these winged humanoids, or do you think it's just geographically where they happen to inhabit?
Love how Ryan's just geeking out right now.
Yes, that's okay. We knew he was going to.
We knew he would.
We knew he was. We have questions too, Tobias. It's just we're going to let him get it out
We're gonna let him get it out real quick.
Yeah, right. You're gonna have to form an orderly queue, and then we can take the questions in order.
Yeah.
No, in answer to that, I think that when it comes to Mothman sightings specifically, it doesn't seem as though most witnesses have a predilection towards paranormal experiences, and so I don't know that is necessary to having a Mothman sighting, because plenty of people will have had no other paranormal experiences throughout their life. Now, maybe they've had some other weird stuff around their Mothman sighting, but if it's related to that Mothman sighting, then I consider it part of the same phenomenon. Okay. So yeah, I don't know that there is any special, gift or sensitivity to the paranormal that is necessary. Now, certainly there is a small percentage of people who have had lots of other experiences, or maybe they consider themselves a medium or having some other parapsychological gift or something similar. But again, it doesn't seem to be a necessary ingredient.
Interesting. Okay.
So you mentioned something about how initially a lot of your reports, or most of your reports, seem to be coming from around the Great Lakes area, correct? Do you think that has anything to do with the, I guess it's called the Michigan Triangle, about the things that disappear in that area, kind of like the Bermuda Triangle and the Alaskan Triangle? Isn't there one that's associated with the Great Lakes as well?
There is, and I'm kind of torn on the triangle phenomenon, because like literally any 3 points on a map form a triangle, right? You can make a triangle out of anything and just say that weird stuff happens there. Now, I can't say that it isn't related, but I will say this: there haven't been many sighting reports over the lake itself. And when I think about why we get the reports we do from the areas we do, it seems to me like it's an issue of reporting as much as anything. So, well, for instance, like my online footprint, when you're talking about things like search engine optimization and how somebody would find a website like mine online, especially back when this started, because we're in southern Wisconsin. Basically the searches that people would be doing in those areas would be more likely to find me or Lon Strickler over at Phantoms and Monsters, who had also been covering a lot of this kind of stuff. And so I think as much as anything, what happened was we had a couple of initial sightings, and they gained a lot of popularity quickly. And that led to people in the same areas seeing that and thus reporting their sightings. And I am curious whether or not, if basically we had the resources to kind of market specifically to different areas, if we would see the same thing happen. Like if somehow I could reach everybody in Oklahoma and be like, hey, how many winged humanoids have you guys seen? If we would get a similar percentage, of the overall population coming forward and saying, hey, we've seen this too.
So is that why you think there is such a large concentration of these reports coming out of Chicago then?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that is 100% population driven. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to
go ahead, Blake.
I want to actually kind of back up just a little bit, because I'm very curious of how you yourself got here on your journey. Like, how do you, I guess, reach the pinnacle of being, the Mothman of the Lake Michigan area, so to speak? If you want to give, you ain't got to go well into deep, but if you want to give a condensed version of how you get to that level, I'd love to hear that.
Totally on accident.
I love it.
That's how it goes. No, at the time, I was writing news articles for our website over at the Singular Fortean Society. And I had seen this trio of sightings come through the Mutual UFO Network case management system. And MUFON had published a short article. talking about them, and they were basically this trio of winged humanoid sightings or large weird winged creature sightings out of Chicago. And so I thought, well, that's an interesting story, and I wrote about it for our website. And at that time, I didn't think anything was going to come of it. I thought it was just another weird story that we see a million of all the time, and there's no follow-up or anything, and that would just be the end of it. But of course, that's not what that's not what happened. I mean, after that, reports started just coming in left, right, and center, and they were initially coming into sites like Phantoms and Monsters, and then UFO Clearinghouse, and then after I had covered it for a certain amount of time, they started coming to us directly. And I interviewed everybody else involved, and because of my proximity to the sighting areas, I was brought in, and we just kind of all started working together on it. But that's how it happened. Just those initial 3 sightings that I thought were going to go nowhere, but would at least make for one, semi-passable article that people might enjoy. And then here we are.
And now it's your every waking thought and drives you absolutely insane.
So what if someone makes this report, and I wanted to ask real quick before I finish this question: are you a member of MUFON?
I was. I'm not currently. I started my investigatory career as a MUFON field investigator.
Oh wow.
Oh boy, probably like 17 years ago. And I did that for several years before deciding to kind of go in my own direction.
Okay. So that leads into my question of whenever you get this report, how do you actually go about researching this? Because obviously they don't have pictures. Obviously it's eyewitness testimony, which is very, very fallible. How do you go about researching and deeming someone's sighting credible or perhaps not credible, or hallucination or imagination, or how do you discern it?
Sure. So the first thing that I want to do whenever possible is I want to speak to the witness directly. That can be over the phone, but I would like to meet them in person if that is at all possible. If I can go out there and they can show me around the actual sighting area, awesome. But talking on the phone is fine too. And so I always start there. I'll get a good recording of that so I can transcribe it later. And part of that is because I want it to be accurate, and I want to have a record of it. And a lot of that is because I want to accurately portray people's experiences. Like if I'm going to be writing about their personal experience, then I want to be able to do so in a way that is accurate and that fundamentally represents them in a way that is authentic, right?
You want to use their words instead of yours, right?
Yeah, because it's not about me. Yeah. Right. So yeah, step one is interview. After that, initial report. So based off of whatever they send me, I'll have questions and everything. And so once we get past that, then it's time to actually fact check. And now, obviously, I generally speaking can't prove whether or not they actually saw a Mothman or whatever they're claiming to have seen. But what I can do is I can follow up on the other details. So I can verify geographic details. I can verify like historical weather data. I can check up on every other part of their story to see if anything doesn't add up. And if it doesn't, then maybe I will have to consider whether or not they're actually telling the truth about their experiences. I will say this. I've really never had anybody that I've interviewed that I thought wasn't being honest. That's
Really?
never happened. Yeah. Now I've got reports that I don't put a lot of stock in, but it never makes it to an interview. I don't think a lot of people who want to hoax or are trying to pull one over on you are willing to get to that interview portion, because that's when stuff gets real. You know, it's a lot more difficult to convince somebody when you're actually speaking to them. You know, if you're just making up a bunch of garbage, than it is to just write out an email or something with some tall tale.
Right.
So what is the percentage of cases that come across your desk though, where like your bullshit alarm goes off? Is it like, is there more so of that than there is like actual sightings you believe that happen, or vice versa?
No, you know, honestly, the percentage of reports that I think are not credible are a tiny minority.
Okay.
Yeah,
awesome.
the vast majority of reports that I've received directly. Now there are reports that have been sent other places where you know, they weren't necessarily investigated to my standards, and you know, I can't speak to the validity of those reports, although there are a decent percentage of them that I think are probably not credible and likely represent somebody just making stuff up. But for the people that have reached out, oh, hello.
Hi, puppy dog.
For the people that have reached out to me directly, the vast majority of them are being honest and are willing to talk about their experiences, and certainly seem to have experienced something that they can't explain.
Well, I think it comes to a point. Just think about like what we do with the paranormal spiritual side of things. You know, when we have people reach out to us, we want to believe them. Right. You know, it's like you said earlier, because what they are experiencing is real to them. Now, whether we can take in all that data that you were just talking about and figure out a rational explanation for it, you know, that's something else. So that's I like that question, Ryan. That's pretty good. Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you get on this journey to even get into the paranormal though? Like what is the thing that started you to get, it just kickstarted your journey essentially?
Oh, sure. So, you know, honestly, I like to tell people that if I hadn't experienced the things that I have in my life, I probably wouldn't care about any of this. Really. I really wouldn't.
Same.
Yeah. Origin story right now. What's your origin story, superhero?
Right. You know, my earliest memories as a kid, I mean, a little kid, like 2, 3, 4 years old, are being terrified to go to bed because I knew when I did that something was coming for me, you know, and so at a very, very young age, you know, I have these fragments of memories, you know, like nothing complete that came later, but at that young, you know, low single digit ages, you know, I can remember you know, sleeping with the covers over my head, of course, which is the imperfect force field that we all try.
No, they're magic. They keep monsters away. They work.
Right. I would tell kids that, but I wouldn't feel good about it because it's not true.
I tell adults that.
Fair enough. So it didn't work for me. Maybe I need to have those like blankets returned or something. But I remember you know, sleeping with the blankets over my head, and I would see like hands pressing in from the outside, or waking up to the feeling of something digging into my sides painfully, or you know, lifting me up. Right. And then that continued into, well, I mean, ongoing really, into when I was old enough to actually form, you know, complete memories. And so like I said, it never really stopped. You know, I would wake up to see figures standing over my bed. You know, something that would look like the traditional gray alien. Oh. I remember once I was in my early 20s, and this is a pretty spectacular story, honestly. I was living at home, and this is the bedroom that I had grown up in. And I went to bed one night, and there was nothing out of the ordinary, right? I just went to bed like I always did, and I woke up suddenly for no particular reason. Like I just couldn't figure out immediately what had woke me up. Like there was no obvious stimulus, you know?
Right.
And I was looking around, and we lived in the suburbs. And so there was always lights outside that would kind of like illuminate stuff enough where you could see okay-ish, right? And so I looked around, and my eyes adjusted, and everything was where it was supposed to be. And it took me a second because everything seemed off until I realized that I seemed to be floating like several feet above my bed. And so I looked to my left. I wasn't paralyzed. I could move. I chose not to move because it didn't seem like a great idea, right? And so I looked to my left, and I see this shadow figure standing next to my bed. And I had the distinct impression that I wasn't supposed to be awake for this. And I'll never forget this. I look over at this thing, and it just looked like a shadow person, like the all black silhouette of a man, basically. And I look at it, and it reaches its hand out and places its hand on my chest. And at the time, I interpreted that as being comforting, but I don't really know its motivation, you know. And it places its hand on my chest, and then I'm lowered back down to my bed, and then it just vanishes, like just disappears, you know, while I'm looking at it. And yeah, and so I'm on top of my covers at that point, which is weird because I didn't go to sleep that way. And I just laid there for a while. You know, I didn't get up and wake anybody up because at this point I knew better. You know, like nobody's going to do anything. It really that's just going to piss off my parents because then they're not getting enough sleep. You know?
I would have to wake somebody up because I'd have been laying in a puddle of my own wet because I'd have wet myself and flipping out. I'd have been like,
that's the thing. That's the normal question that I get is, well, weren't you terrified? And at that point, I think that I understood that if whatever this was, whatever I've been dealing with throughout my life wanted to hurt me, I'd be hurt, you know?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you get used to it. You know, the human mind is adaptable if it's anything, right? And so you can adapt to almost any situation. And so I get startled, like, you know, if that's not something anybody has any control over. That's just an automatic reflex. But in terms of being scared of whatever this is, it's really not done anything to frighten me on purpose. I've never been hurt, you know. And so at that time, no, I was just confused. You know, I didn't know what the point of it was. And I still don't, you know. I've received other reports from other people that are eerily similar, reports of being watched, you know, just observed while you're sleeping by shadow people even. And yeah, I don't know if I was being taken or returned or what, but I don't think I was supposed to be awake for it, whatever it was. And so whatever was going on, I think it just put a quick end to it and got the hell out of there.
So have you ever had one of those full body X-ray scans to see if you have any little metal implants in you anywhere? That's a serious question.
Sure. So like in MRI or something?
Yeah.
No, I mean, they're super expensive.
Yeah.
So I've never had like a legit medical reason to get one. So it just hasn't happened.
So especially when you say you're digging in your side. I'm sorry, Ryan, because this whole digging in your side, that's fascinating me that didn't frighten you. She said you would feel things digging in your side.
Oh, that scared me because I was a little kid.
Was it painful or it was?
It was painful. That's now I should say that stuff did scare the crap out of me. I was terrified as a kid when that kind of stuff would happen. It was only over the course of years that I got used to it, to the point where by the time I was in my 20s, I had more or less made my peace with it. But no, you're right. It did hurt. It was uncomfortable. It never did me any harm, but I didn't like it. And so, yeah, like that was terrifying when I was a kid.
You never had any marks or anything whenever you woke up?
No.
There was no physical mark, but you physically felt the pain.
Yes. And that's actually something that had happened again relatively recently. This was several years ago. And my wife and I had gone to bed again, totally normal. And I woke up that night to her having some kind of dream. I didn't know what was going on at first. Like, she was saying something in her sleep. And I turned over to see if everything was okay. And she talks in her sleep sometimes. So I pretty quickly figured out that's what was happening. It's like, okay, great.
Right.
She's talking in her sleep, whatever. And so at that point, like, I'm fully awake. Like, I am conscious, right? And so I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to try to get back to sleep, And I roll over. I kind of check my phone and set it back down. And I'm like, okay. And before I can close my eyes, I see this like black kind of scaly hand. So if you can imagine laying on your stomach with like your head to the left, and you see this hand like come up into your field of vision, right? Like, I saw that.
Oh.
I know.
Yeah.
And as soon as I saw it, I felt that old familiar feeling where I felt something digging into my sides, and then I felt hands that seemed to be reaching underneath me and picking me up. And so, okay, honestly, did I freak out a little bit at that? Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And so I started frantically like slapping at these hands, and I could feel my hands hitting them, whatever they were. And so like I start freaking out. I'm slapping at these hands, and as I do that, I see like that hand in front of me just like recedes back the way it had come, and then it's gone. And I like, I turn around and I don't see anything. So I don't know.
So
but,
did you feel like did you just feel like a solid object, or did you feel like a texture? Did you feel like a consistency at all when you're touching whatever it is?
Yeah, it felt like somebody's hands and arms. I mean, it felt like if you were there reaching over me, trying to pick me up, and I was slapping at your arm, that's what it felt like.
Interesting. So, but at that point, even though I know like you had your fear response where you're like slapping at, like, leave me alone, because you've had this happen for so many years, are you now more so curious about it than you are scared of it?
Yes. Yeah. I think that's fair to say. I have, I've had experiences that were communication. I didn't really understand the communication, but I found myself more open to those. Whereas I think when I was younger, when I was a little kid, I wasn't open to that. If for instance, during these experiences, rather than trying to communicate, I would shut down. I would have just a complete fear response to whatever was happening. Whereas now, if things start to get weird, I can keep my cool just a little bit better, and at least try to communicate with whatever is happening.
And has it ever communicated who it is and what it wants?
I have had a few weird experiences like that. One I remember specifically because it was just so weird and it was so real. I was house sitting for my parents. And again, this was probably a decade or so ago. And I was watching TV, and I just suddenly felt very tired, like out of nowhere. Like I was fine. I went from fine to I can't even keep my eyes open. I need to lay down right now. And so I was on the couch, and I just kind of like did this, just kind of like slumped over, closed my eyes. And when I did, I saw this tiny object approaching me from what seemed like a vast distance, in the darkness behind my eyes. And it came up on me. And as it did, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it looked like just the head of what you would consider like a gray alien, right? So, that kind of like weird ovoid head with the large black eyes and everything.
Right.
And it said one thing, and it didn't open its mouth and speak or anything. It felt like a sort of telepathic communication. And it just said, we are you. And then once it said that, it went in the exact opposite. Like it just went in reverse and like receded and shrank away. And then as soon as that was done, like I opened my eyes and I felt great again. Like I had all the energy in the world, just like I had before that happened.
Well, I have a question about your communication, because you said that now it sometimes feels like they're trying to communicate with you. And you said that that particular communication was telepathic. I know that a lot of what's the proper word, to experiencers, I believe is what they prefer to be called, as experiencers, say that some of them get what's known as the download, which is, the vast input of information suddenly. Have you ever received the download, or what you would consider the download of the information?
I guess not in so many words, unless you would consider, like what I just described as something like that. I've never, suddenly felt like, I could build a spaceship or something based off of ideas that were beamed into my head. You know what I mean?
So you've had the communication, but not the actual download. Experiencers we've talked to have said sometimes that they get like knowledge of things that they never had knowledge of before. And some of them have said that now they can speak a language they didn't know how to speak. That
would be awesome though.
Yeah. But I was just curious if that was something, and like they've received a communication, but then they get a download of something they didn't know before.
Yeah, I've never received any useful information.
Okay.
I can say that, it's been a lot of just weird conversations and cryptic statements like "we are you," and that's about it.
So
I
we're
wish
talking to an actual alien right now, huh? Awesome. Love it.
So did that change your entire paradigm of what you view aliens or whatever they are as when it said that we are you?
It's I think that I had been considering a lot of alternative hypotheses for aliens and things prior to that, but it's something that I have given a lot of thought to, because it could mean so many things. Like are they highly evolved humans from the future? Are are we seeded here from somewhere else, wherever they're coming from? Even weirder stuff, like something I've thought about quite a bit is one of the things that our ancestors used to think fairies were spirits of the dead, right? And so I think about that. Like, what if you could become a fairy when you die? What if you could become Mothman or an alien gray or something? What if in this existence of pure consciousness, you could take any form that you want, or anything that serves you? And so, we've got these beings that are communicating with us sort of directly through consciousness, as a medium. And so, what if they were like represent something like that? I have no idea. It's all so weird.
Right.
I'm coming back as a dragon if that's an option.
Right?
I'm gonna burn some shit down.
That would be sweet.
Would it be awesome? I hope we get to pick.
Nope, not you, Shelly. You're coming back as a ficus. Get over it.
Yeah.
That's mean. I'm not a ficus kind of person.
She's more of a fern.
Excuse me. Go ahead.
I mean, and it doesn't help, like you were saying, like with these cryptic statements, like it doesn't, like, just give me the information. I want to know who you are and where you come from. It's always interesting that with these people have these experiences, it's always like these vague statements and platitudes that come from these beings. And I don't know if it's, are we supposed to find the answer ourselves? Is it supposed to be like some sort of like grand cosmic scavenger hunt? Like what the hell's going on?
It does honestly seem to have a lot in common with sort of like initiatory, shamanic or magical rituals or experiences, like that kind of initiation,
Right.
where you are expected to gain wisdom through the solution to mysteries with which you are presented. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I agree. Like, why can't anything ever be
Right.
easy? Right? Like
Yeah.
that would be great. But it just it doesn't seem to be that way. So yeah, it almost seems like the purpose of it is to inspire us to
Right.
figure it out. Like that's the whole point, is making us have to think about it. So it's almost like the journey is as important as the destination.
Right.
So kind of in saying all of that, and kind of the way that you were talking about with the shamanic aspect and everything to it, with saying we are you and all that, do you fall under the belief system that all of this, everything that basically like kind of what we three go out and do in the field, what you go out and do in the field, what we're all talking about and all that stuff, is it all interconnected somehow? Do you believe that it all just creates this web with one another?
The more that I see, because like I investigate everything, I've been in haunted houses, I've investigated, UFO sightings, cryptids, whatever. The more that I see, the more similarities that I find, but I don't necessarily take the Keelian ultra terrestrial hypothesis. I don't necessarily subscribe to that, because I think that's very reductionist in its approach, because there are some distinctions between say like somebody communicating with the spirit of a loved one versus somebody communicating with an extraterrestrial gray or Bigfoot or Mothman or whatever, right? So what I think, or at least one of the ideas that I'm willing to entertain, is that much of this is working on the same level. Like much of it is communicating with us directly, using consciousness as a medium. And so that doesn't mean that everything's the same, but it does at least imply that everything exists in the same ecosystem, right? So like, sure, bears and wolves both could live in the same forest, but that doesn't make them the same animal, right? But they do have a lot in common. Like they are mammals, they're both carnivores, so on and so forth. They can have a lot of overlap and not be exactly the same thing. I think they just operate on similar principles.
So I'm sorry.
No, go ahead,
I have
Shelley.
a question. Is that so? Whenever you go out and you investigate, and you've said that you've met people who have had abduction stories and people who have had sightings, do you find that there is a certain type of person that experiences these things? Because we've all heard the theory about if you have blue eyes, you have a some kind of alien seed to you. We've heard those theories, but do you find that there is a certain type of person that seems more likely to have an encounter?
No. I've also heard a lot of those theories. Like if you've got, AB negative blood or something, then you're going to be abducted.
Or the RH factor.
Yeah. You're part alien or whatever. No, I've never found that. The witnesses with whom I have spoken form an almost perfect cross-section of our society. They come from all socioeconomic classes, all ethnic backgrounds. It's just a stunning variety of different people. And to me, it just goes to show that this kind of stuff can happen to literally anybody. Literally
nobody's
anybody.
safe. There you go, peeps. You're all fair game. You're all fair game. not trying to cause any kind of, mass panic or anything, but yeah, you're not safe.
It's true. I know that people are always looking for patterns. We're all trying to make sense of this stuff, but the reality is, from what I've seen, yeah, like there is no distinction made between individuals based on any external characteristic that I have been able to notice that makes somebody more or less likely to have this kind of experience or any paranormal experience.
That's kind of interesting. Well, I think that's kind of interesting because the three of us, we've said in past episodes and things that we have noticed just from people coming to us and telling us things that we see a vast majority, I would say a higher percentage of what we would classify probably just like marginalized individuals having paranormal experiences, poltergeist activity, spirits and all that stuff. And or on our investigations as well, when we take the public with us, that your more marginalized individuals tend to have more paranormal experiences than people who maybe fall into the category of that non-marginalized individual, which is fascinating to me because I don't know if it has to do with background, how maybe trauma that they've gone through of their life or anything like that make them more prone to experience that. Now that's more on the paranormal side. So I find it interesting on your side that it's kind of a even playing field, if you will, that you've witnessed people from all kinds of different backgrounds having these experiences.
Well, I mean, this goes for literally every kind of phenomenon that I've ever investigated. Like that's interesting. If there is some if there is something going on that makes any marginalized person more likely to experience the paranormal, I think that would be a fascinating avenue of discovery. But yeah, I guess I would just want to know more. You know what I mean? Like, so marginalized, boy, that does a lot of heavy lifting. Like that covers a lot of ground.
Right.
Yeah. So, like we'd have to really be very sort of specific about what, aspect of that person is the aspect that is, sort of responsible for the marginalization of that person. And so if we're talking about like people being separated on, ethnic grounds or based on income or sex, gender, anything like that, that would probably make a difference. Or if it's somehow just anybody at all, that falls into any sort of category that would make them prone to marginalization, then that's interesting, and maybe that does speak to sort of the increased trauma from those experiences. I don't know.
It's just an observation that we three just throughout the years have kind of noticed happening over time. That's like, wow, we seem to have a lot of these people that when they tell us their background or tell us, hey, I identify with this group over here or this group over here, and we're like,
or I have this
traumatic
experience.
Yeah, or have this traumatic experience or something, and we're like,
wow,
wow,
the ones that
that's
have the most intense experiences, and things just seem to happen around them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I would wonder if that also comes down to an issue of reporting, because that's something we always have to consider.
True.
We only get stories from the people talking to us, right?
Right.
And so it can be very difficult to know what's happening to everybody else.
Right.
Right.
And so, is it possible that people like that could who, if they're already marginalized, they see themselves on the fringe anyway. It would make sense to me because I was a weird kid,
Right.
We're kids, all of us.
Oh,
I was nerdy and weird, and I got picked on, and all my friends were nerdy and weird. And so, I understand somewhat, what it's like to kind of end up in the alternative clique, and so I would have to wonder then if the reason that you'd see so many reports from people who are being marginalized is because that marginalization has led them to the fringe where we all exist to take their report.
Right. Or they're more
Good
open
point.
to talking.
That's a good point. That's a
Yeah.
damn good point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I think you hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
I
Right.
like it out here on the fringe. Y'all leave me alone.
Yeah.
Oh, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I
Oh,
know.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's
The
right.
fringe is
Yeah.
fun.
We got cookies out here. I love it.
Right. I wouldn't know how to be normal. I don't think I
No,
could.
I don't think any
Right.
of us would. You were talking about being, that kind of nerdy kid that got picked on and all this stuff. Well, hell, here we all four are on the screen together. So, yay, we did a good
Yeah.
job there. So, wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, gentlemen, do we have any further questions for Tobias? Because we're running to the end of our time. Ryan has one.
I do have one more. Since you were involved with MUFON, is there one case that you worked on that absolutely just completely blows your mind? You have no explanation for.
Ooh.
Oh boy.
I would think his own experiences would have
Or
blown my
Yeah,
mind.
no
that,
shit.
in
Yeah.
either way.
Sure. Well, I've talked a lot about my own stuff already. Like specifically with MUFON. I mean, there were several cases, of course, that I could never explain. I didn't know what that person had seen. One of the most compelling, I think, was somebody who had reached out about something that had happened to them in childhood, and they talked about going down into their basement and meeting with this strange being. And at the time,
What?
yeah, right. And
Yeah.
so it was kind of like abduction adjacent.
Mhm.
And at the time, I remember them seeming very normal and it seemed incredible. But it didn't really strike me as quite as impactful, really, at least to me personally, until years and years later. And I began to get other similar reports from people who would talk about, being children and sort of being led away from their bed for various reasons. And now that's not in and of itself necessarily unusual. You hear about that a lot if you read about like alien abduction and stuff like that. But what was interesting to me was that these people weren't reporting alien abductions. They were reporting hauntings and things like that. So, for instance, there was a woman that I spoke with about a series of weird phenomena. But one of the things she wanted to talk about was her brother, when they were growing up, used to wake up in the basement constantly. And he would talk about how this large man would wake him up at night and pick him up and carry him down there. And when I heard that, I was like, well, boy, that reminds me of something. And then I thought back to that alien visitation experience where this person felt compelled to go down into their basement as a child. And I was like, well, boy, those have a lot in common, And that really led me down this rabbit. And again, this was years and years later. It was probably 10, 12, at least years after I had received that other report. And that really got me thinking a lot about nighttime visitations and how they happen across all aspects of the paranormal, everything from ghosts and hauntings to alien abduction to cryptids. People talk about being woken up and encountering, some aspect of those seemingly disparate phenomena, and how much they have in common, and what that might mean.
Right.
And it all started, 15 years ago with that one report from MUFON of somebody who talked to an alien when they were just a little kid.
That's absolutely fascinating.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Tobias, we want to give you a chance to promote where they can come and find you, your website, and absolutely your books too. Why don't you tell them your books, and let's get y'all go buy his books. They are fascinating. Ryan is reading one right now.
I'm reading Strange Tales right now, and it is fantastic. You are a fantastic writer, man. I like the way you write. It's a very easy read, and it's very, very interesting.
Well, thank you so much. Honestly, I don't know any writers who ever get sick of hearing that. So that's
I'm
really,
gonna tell you,
that's really great.
out of the three of us on the screen for the topics that we cover on the podcast, this is the one who reads a book for every single topic. And I will tell you, we've heard plenty of times, guys, I can't make it through this book. It's too freaking dry.
We've heard plenty of book reviews.
Yeah.
So for him to give you that book review, take his word for it. I promise you.
Oh, it's amazing,
That's great.
man. I'm having a great
Well,
time.
yeah. That is exactly what I'm going for. You can see behind me, I've got shelves and shelves of paranormal books, and I've read most of them. But yeah, a lot of times I would read them and they'd be very dry and sort of academic. And I'm like, man, nobody else is reading this,
Right,
and that's,
right.
I wanted to do the exact opposite of that, something that you could pick up and it is approachable. And that actually goes towards like inclusivity. I think it's important to make these subjects approachable. So you don't feel like you have to have an advanced degree to pick up and read one of these books and relate to it. That's a big deal to me. So that's awesome. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely, man. It's a fun time.
In terms of like where people can find me, of course, if you're interested in keeping up with what we do over at the Singular Fortean Society, you can go to our website at singularfortean.com. You can follow us on social media. So at Singular Fortean on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, Tumblr, TikTok, like just literally anything you can think
MySpace,
of.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Friendster.
I'm gonna go back and make like a MySpace channel. Just
Yeah, there
for
you
that.
go. There you go.
But yeah, you can GeoCities. Nice.
Yeah.
You can find my books online. Of course, you can go to singularfortean.com/books, or just your favorite online book retailer, Amazon, whatever, and you can find them there. So I've got 3 out. I've got the Lake Michigan Mothman, High Strangeness in the Midwest. I've got Strange Tales of the Impossible, and I've got the Singular Fortean Society's Yuletide Guide to High Strangeness. So.
That sounds amazing. Well, if you'll hang on just a second, Blake's got to do a little housekeeping. So, Blake, why don't you tell them everything they need to know?
I'm going to keep it short and sweet this week since we have a special guest, because we don't like to keep them for too much longer to hear all of our boring rambling that we have to do. So, guys, y'all know that After Dark with EVP is out on Paraflix Paranormal Plus, so make sure you go and check that out. Also, make sure you click on our Linktree link that is going to be posted to our Facebook page tomorrow. That is going to include the Paraflix Paranormal Plus, as well as our Patreon page, our public investigation online merchandise store. All of that, you can find that. If you get signed up on Patreon, we do offer that 7-day free trial, and you are going to get over 375 Patreon exclusive videos that is going to include the pre and post broadcasts, or public investigation videos, all of that kind of stuff, fun stuff, weird crap that we divulge way too much of, way too many personal stories. But anyways, all of that goes directly to support the show, everything, to support us, everything vaguely paranormal, and be able to bring you all the ghostly stuff that we do week after week. Of course, we love all the likes, shares, downloads, comments, and all of that. So if you have any stories, comments, or questions, you can send those to the evppod@gmail.com. That's THEEVPPOD@gmail.com.
Like, share, and go and subscribe to that Facebook and YouTube channel. So we want to thank everybody for joining us tonight on Everything Vaguely Paranormal. Special thank you to our wonderful guest, author, researcher, investigator, Tobias Wayland. Thank you so much, sir.
Yes, thank you.
And we had a blast talking to you. And so for my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith, Mr. Ryan Roberts, I'm Shelley Pruitt, and thank you for joining us. And as always, we will see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.